I was 17 the day they brought the dress into my room. It was wrapped in lace and silence, the kind of silence that speaks louder than any scream. The fabric shimmered under the lantern light, white with golden stitching, as if that beauty could distract me from what it meant. I sat on the edge of my bed, hands folded in my lap, heart pounding like a drum I couldn't quiet. They said it was time, that the day had come, that I would be honoring my family and my culture by marrying my cousin, just as it had been arranged since I was a child. They used words like duty, tradition, and legacy, but all I felt was fear, deep, twisting fear. I had always loved our way of life, the music, the color, the freedom of dancing under open skies. But this was not freedom. This was a sentence, a future I had not chosen, wrapped in gold and expectation. That night, I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't scared, but because something in me went still. I stared at the dress for hours, trying to imagine myself in it. A bride, a wife, a girl given away. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't see it. I couldn't see myself disappearing like that. So I made a decision, quietly, without telling a soul. If no one would fight for me, I would have to fight for myself, even if it meant breaking everything that held me, even if it meant walking away from the only world I'd ever known. The sun rose too quickly that morning, as if it too was eager to see me become something I didn't want to be. I woke before anyone else, my body stiff with dread. The air smelled of smoke and perfume, signs of celebration, of joy. But inside me, everything felt hollow. As I stepped outside my small tent, I saw the village already moving. Women were heating bread over open flames, children chasing chickens, and my cousin's brothers laughing like the day belonged to them. I stood there quietly, taking in what I knew could be my last glimpse of this life. I knew every corner of that place, the creaky wooden steps of the elder's house, the willow tree that shaded the path to the river, the stone well where I once whispered dreams I was too afraid to say aloud. It had been home, but home, I realized, had become a cage. When I returned to the tent, the dress was waiting for me, laid out carefully as if it deserved honor. The scarf, the beads, the long embroidered skirt, everything was perfect. But it wasn't mine. I hadn't chosen it, and I wouldn't wear it. I sat down on the floor, cross-legged, and closed my eyes. I wasn't thinking about escape yet, not exactly. I was thinking about who I was before they started calling me a bride. I was thinking about the little girl who used to dance barefoot in the dust, who believed in magic, who believed in choice. And I realized she was still there, hiding, waiting for me to listen. And that morning, I finally did. As the morning unfolded, the camp filled with music and motion. Drums echoed softly in the distance. Women moved from tent to tent carrying trays of sweets, and the older men gathered under the shade to smoke and speak of tradition. I walked among them like a shadow, invisible but closely observed. Everyone knew who I was that day. The bride, the girl promised, the one who was about to fulfill her duty. Their eyes followed me, but not with cruelty. There was pride, approval, even warmth. That made it worse. It made it harder. Because they didn't see the war inside me. They saw only what they wanted to see. Another girl following the path laid out for her, without question, without voice. My cousin smiled at me once. It was a brief, crooked smile. He was standing near the musicians, laughing with his father. He looked proud, certain, as if the future was already sealed, written in stone. He had no idea what I was feeling. Or maybe he did and didn't care. I wanted to scream, but instead I smiled back. Not because I wanted to, but because it was safer that way. In our world, a smile could protect you. It could hide the fire. Back in my tent, I closed the flap behind me and sat in the silence. The dress still lay there, untouched. The jewelry glittered in the morning light. But it all felt like it belonged to someone else, someone obedient, someone already gone. I wasn't her. And in that silence, with the voices of celebration rising outside, I made my decision. I wouldn't be a bride that day. I would be a girl who ran. I had never traveled far. The world beyond our village was a mystery I knew only through whispered stories and half-remembered tales told by cousins who had left and never returned. But as I sat alone in my tent, surrounded by the symbols of a life I no longer wanted, I began to trace a path in my mind. Not on paper, not with markers or names, but through instinct. I thought of the old gravel road behind the pasture, the one the trucks used to bring flour and firewood. I remembered that it curved east toward the hills where the trees grew thick and the air smelled different. I remembered there was a train station 2 towns over. I had never seen it, but I'd heard the sound of whistles when the wind blew just right. I didn't know exactly where I would go. I just knew I couldn't stay. I waited until mid-afternoon when the music was loudest and the camp busiest. That's when I slipped out, dressed not in the wedding clothes but in a plain brown skirt and a black shawl, clothes I could disappear in. I carried nothing but a small pouch with a few coins I had saved over years. No phone, no bag, just a fast heartbeat and the burning certainty that I couldn't look back. Every step I took away from the village felt like walking through fire. I wasn't just leaving a wedding. I was leaving an entire identity, a family, a name. But I didn't stop. Because somewhere out there was a different kind of life. One where I could choose who I was and who I loved. And that life, even if it didn't exist yet, was mine to claim. The moment my feet left the edge of the village path, I felt the world shift beneath me, not physically but spiritually. As if something ancient had been broken, a thread cut, a door slammed shut behind me. I didn't run at first. I walked fast, heart pounding, every sound around me suddenly sharper. The rustle of trees, the distant laughter, the rhythmic clapping of hands at the wedding gathering. It all echoed like a warning. I kept my head down and my pace steady. I passed the last tent, the last goat tied to a post, and then came the open land. That's when I started running. It wasn't graceful. My skirt tangled around my knees and my shoes weren't made for speed, but I didn't stop. The road ahead was uneven and dry, lined with weeds and broken fence posts. I ran past memories, past stories told at firesides, past every version of myself that once thought she didn't have a choice. With each step, fear gripped tighter. What if someone had seen me? What if they came after me? I knew how fast the boys could ride, how determined my uncle could be when shamed. I knew that leaving wasn't just rebellion, it was betrayal in their eyes. But I also knew this: if they found me, they would take me back. They would not ask why, they would not listen. So I ran harder. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't running because I was told. I wasn't dancing because it was expected. I was moving because it was mine. This choice, this step, this breathless dash toward something I couldn't name yet. Freedom didn't whisper. It screamed. By the time the sun began to set, my legs were aching and my chest burned with every breath. I hadn't looked back once, afraid that if I did, I'd see someone, a rider, a shadow, a memory chasing me. But no one came. Only the wind moved with me, carrying the dust I kicked up behind. I found a narrow creek tucked between two hills, its water shallow but clean. I knelt and splashed my face, my hands trembling. I caught a glimpse of myself in the reflection. My hair was wild, my cheeks flushed, and my eyes, they were different. I didn't look like a bride. I didn't look like a child. I looked like someone who had survived something invisible. I sat down on a patch of grass and listened to the sounds I had never noticed before. Crickets in the bushes, birds calling to one another. The sound of silence that wasn't empty, but alive. It was the first time I realized I could be still and safe at the same time, but the silence didn't last long. My mind started racing. What would happen when they realized I was gone? Would they search the roads? Would they call the other camps? Would they lie about me to cover their shame? I knew the answer didn't matter, because I wasn't going back, not even if they cried, not even if they begged. This wasn't about hurting them. It was about saving me. That night I didn't have a bed, just a blanket of stars and the rhythm of my own breath. But for the first time in years, I didn't feel owned. I felt real, and that was more than I ever thought I could be. At dawn, I walked again, slowly this time, my body stiff from the night spent curled beneath the sky. My feet were blistered and my skirt was torn at the hem, but I kept going. Hunger had begun to settle in, dull and quiet, like a shadow walking beside me. I didn't have a destination, just a direction, a way. By late morning, I reached the edge of a small village, not one like mine. There were stone houses here, small gardens, and no music in the air. I hesitated near the road, afraid someone might recognize who I was, or worse, what I had done. That's when I saw her. She was older than me, maybe in her 50s, with silver strands braided into her dark hair and a long skirt dusted with flour. She was sweeping the front steps of a bakery, humming to herself, calm as the breeze. She noticed me, of course. I was impossible to miss. A girl alone, disheveled, clearly from somewhere else. But she didn't ask questions. She simply said, "You look like you could use something warm," and gestured inside. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Inside the bakery, the air smelled like bread and sugar. She gave me a roll and poured a cup of tea, then returned to her sweeping. No name, no judgment, no demand for answers. Just a moment of kindness, something I hadn't known I needed until I felt it. I sat by the window, watching the street, wondering how something so small could feel like a miracle. She never asked where I came from, and I never told her. But in that quiet bakery, for the first time, I believed I might actually make it. That night, I found shelter in an old shed behind the bakery. The woman had left it open, as if she knew I might stay but didn't want to make me say it aloud. I laid on a pile of folded sacks and stared at the wooden beams above me, tracing lines with my eyes as if they might spell out answers. For the first time since running, I had space to think. And that's when the grief came. Not loud, not sudden, but slow and suffocating, like fog seeping into the corners of a room. I missed them, not the wedding, not the cage, but the parts that had felt like love. My little brother's laugh, my grandmother's stories whispered at night, the smell of stew bubbling in iron pots, the old songs we sang while hanging laundry, the way the tambourines rang under summer skies. I missed what was real, what had once felt like home before it turned into a trap. It hurt in a way I hadn't prepared for, because even though I had escaped something that could have destroyed me, I had also walked away from pieces of myself I didn't know how to carry with me. I wrapped my shawl tighter around my shoulders and let the tears come, quietly. No one needed to hear. This pain was mine, part of the cost of freedom. But in the silence that followed, I realized something. I hadn't just left, I had chosen, and choice was powerful. Even when it broke your heart, even when it meant sleeping on sackcloth in a stranger's shed. I was no longer a girl being led to a wedding. I was a woman who had walked away. The next morning, I woke before the sun. My body ached, but it was a different kind of ache. Not fear, not exhaustion, but something that almost felt like possibility. The sky was still dark, but there was a hint of light on the horizon, and in that moment, I felt it too, the faint beginning of something new. Inside the bakery, the woman was already kneading dough, her hands strong and sure. She nodded when she saw me, not surprised, not startled, just present. That was her gift. She didn't ask me who I was. She let me become whoever I needed to be. Later, as I helped her carry firewood to the oven, a man stopped by. He asked my name. I froze. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. My real name felt too heavy, like it still belonged to the girl I used to be, the one who was meant to be a bride. So I gave him a different name, a simple one I had always liked but had never been allowed to claim. It rolled off my tongue awkwardly, but when he smiled and said, "Nice to meet you," something shifted inside me. It was a small lie, but it felt like truth. That afternoon, I sat outside the bakery and wrote the name in the dirt with a stick. I stared at it, whispered it to myself, tried to believe it was real. And for the first time, it didn't feel like I was running anymore. I was building. Not just a new life, but a new self. One no one could arrange, assign, or control. And in that name, I planted the seed of the woman I was becoming. In the days that followed, the quiet became my companion. Not the kind of silence I had grown up fearing, the silence of obedience, of unspoken rules, of walking with eyes lowered. No, this silence was different. It had space in it, air, possibility. I swept the floors of the bakery. I stacked trays and folded parchment. The work was simple, repetitive, and somehow healing. The woman never asked questions. She just allowed me to exist beside her. That, in itself, was a kind of love I had never known. At night, I returned to the little shed. I made a bed from old blankets and learned the rhythm of my breath in the dark. For the first time, no one waited outside my door. No one checked my clothes, my voice, my steps. No one corrected how I moved or looked at me with the expectation of becoming a wife. I was alone, yes, but I wasn't lonely. Each evening, I sat on the back step and watched the sky. I'd think about my mother's hands, the way she used to brush my hair when I was small. I'd think about the way my uncle laughed when the drums started at night. And I would let the memories come, not to pull me back, but to remind me I had lived many lives already. This now was a new one. No jewelry, no music, no pressure. Just me, a piece of bread, and a cup of tea. And a silence that didn't punish. It invited. For the first time, I felt peace. Not because everything made sense, but because I had finally stopped asking permission to exist. I thought I had left it all behind. The music, the footsteps, the voices that called my name as if they owned it. But one evening, as I was wiping down the tables inside the bakery, I heard it again, the sound of drums, distant at first, like a heartbeat I had tried to forget. I froze, cloth in hand, heart pounding in my chest. Through the window, I saw a caravan moving down the road. Familiar colors, bright scarves, golden jewelry catching the last light of the sun. My people, my past. A wedding party, someone said, passing through. They didn't see me, or maybe they did and didn't recognize me. My hair shorter now, my face harder, my name different. Still, I stepped outside. For a long moment, I watched the wagons move like a dream across the village edge. Children ran alongside them. Women laughed with tambourines. The bride, no older than I had been, smiled shyly from beneath a red veil. And I felt it, a pull, a sting, a longing. But I didn't cry, because I understood something then. I hadn't rejected who I was. I had simply chosen how I would carry it. I could still love the music, I could still miss the food, the fabric, the fire. I didn't have to erase it all to survive. I just had to reclaim it in my own way. And maybe, someday, I would return, not as a runaway, not as a bride, but as a woman who chose herself first. That night, I went back to the shed and opened the journal I had started. I wrote